I'm so happy to introduce Stacy Schaffer today. Stacy is an author, she's a child therapist specializing in grief, and she is a seeker of joy, which I absolutely love. So, welcome, Stacy.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, I'm very glad that we're here together to talk about this important topic. Um, First, I want to ask you, how did you become, like, what was your journey to become a therapist specializing in grief and trauma?
Yeah, so when I was 3, there's a picture of me having a group counseling session for my Care Bears. Grumpy Bear wasn't willing to work things out because you have to be willing. Um, but I grew up surrounded by adults who weren't given the tools they needed to support kids. And I
Mhm.
remember thinking along the way, surely there has to be adults who know what they're doing. I just don't know any. And so there was a long journey of a traumatic childhood, which I can get into if you'd like. But my mom, she developed breast cancer when I was a teenager, and it was a really hard journey. She had 17 surgeries. It was a whole up and down anticipatory grief. And she ended up dying when I was 22, and nobody around me my age knew what to do with that. And so grief kind of, I had to educate myself on grief, and I was already headed to grad school to be a therapist, so it kind of went hand in hand. So
Mhm.
there's something to get nuggets from.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that lived experience to me is just so valuable. It's really valuable to hear from people who've had that lived experience. In fact, when I was thinking about fostering, I really felt like, because I experienced trauma in my childhood as well, that even though I couldn't necessarily, I wouldn't be able to relate to what the children have gone through, I can relate to trauma in general because I lived it as well. And so I thought that there might be some value there for me as a foster parent, somebody who had lived through that and gotten to the other side and could sort of have that kind of empathy. What do you think of that? Is that, in your experience, is that
Oh,
helpful?
yeah, for sure. I mean, you find like a lot of clinicians, they specialize didn't happen by accident, that like they have a special
Yes.
heart. I in grad school I did an internship in a drug and alcohol rehab just because you could get hours, 24 hours a day, and I had a crazy schedule. And I learned so much, but that wasn't my journey. I have plenty of other issues. And so the people who were most effective, in my opinion, like understood what it was like to be like inpatient in one of those places. And so
Right.
like I think that like for me, I never found myself in a textbook.
Hmm.
I was like, that's not true. No, no. And so that's part of my journey of like I wanted to be both like clinically trained and have the lived experience combined.
Sure. Um, you specialize in play therapy, and I was wondering if you could just give our listeners a sense of what that is exactly and why it's beneficial.
Yeah. So the line in the field is the language of kids is play, because a 5-year-old is not going to sit down and be like, I am feeling discouraged about the dissonance I'm experiencing in kindergarten. They're not going to say that. And so their communication comes through play. And so one of my favorite modalities is sand tray. And for those who might not know, but I have two offices. The other one looks like a therapeutic Disneyland. This one's more chill. But I have a big table. It looks like a coffee table. My friend Dave made mine. And you take the top off, and it's gutted, and it's filled with a special soft kind of sand. And then I have what looks like every Happy Meal character over time, lined up in family groups. And so one of the things to do, a directive, is like, show me, pick a character to be you, show me what it's like to be you. And so it's fascinating. Like, I had a kid in a high conflict divorce pick themselves, and then they picked Darth Vader as dad and a teeny tiny mouse as mom, and put themselves
Oh,
in the middle. You're like, well, that's not what we want, and then so
Yep.
you'll have them be like, how do you wish things were, and they move stuff. So that's probably the most common modality of play therapy is sand tray.
I love that. Yeah, that is it also where you have like a rake or something and you can like rake? I when you say sand tray, I think of like the Japanese art of like basically raking or
Yeah.
making pictures with sand. Is that incorporated at all, or that's a totally
Yeah.
different thing?
I mean, I have like in a drawer in the table, like there's tools like that. And
Hmm.
sometimes like people just find it meditative to do things like that. Because I mean the sand itself is a very chill experience. And
Hmm.
there's so many things in the other office that people can fidget with, touch, so that it feels less like a light bulb over your head. Tell me all your feelings. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I do have those tools.
Yeah. Wonderful. Um, if someone were to come to you with a child that they've just welcomed into their home, and the child needs, obviously is in need of some kind of therapy, maybe has been through repetitively traumatic instances, as many children coming from foster care are. How would you approach that child? What advice would you give to the parent regarding getting any kind of therapy?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, like, because as we know, attachment is so important, right?
Hmm.
Especially like with like foster kids and adopted kids. So, like, I would say like to tread lightly, to build that rapport. Like, it's really important to me that kids feel safe in my office and that it's not too rushed. So I always tell kids that they have a right in my office called I Pass. And I'm like, I'm a therapist, so I ask nosy questions to try to help you feel better.
Hmm.
If there's something you don't want to answer, not now, not yet, not ever, you say pass. And that's always honored. And
Hmm.
I'm like, because I don't want to answer things I don't want to answer. And
Hmm.
so I find that usually kids come back to that themselves. And so that it's important that they don't feel like it's any other situation like a teacher where they're like required to answer a thing. And
Hmm.
so I would say to be patient, in like if you the adult trust the therapist, because I always do an intake with the parents first. If you
Hmm.
feel safe, at first, because that's super important, right? Then just to know that like it's my job to like earn the right to be heard and earn the right to connect. And I have a
Sure.
therapy dog, so that helps too.
Oh, that's wonderful. And is the dog always there?
Yeah, Willow, come here. Come here.
That's really cool.
She's a doll. She's
Oh,
a golden retriever. One moment.
yeah, I would love to see her.
She's sleeping because it's snowing.
Oh, yeah. Oh, what a sweetie.
She's like,
Hi.
"Hi, I'm Willow."
Oh my God, she's so cute.
She's
What a
ridiculous.
sweetie.
I know. So she
How,
helps too.
yeah, I was going to ask, how do you incorporate the dog? Is it just the fact that Willow is there that's comforting to children, or do you work in some capacity with Willow?
I mean, it's mainly that she greets everyone, which is really really cute.
Hmm.
But sometimes like I'll be like, "Do you want to tell Willow?" And so they'll be like, "Willow, I feel," and then um, Willow responds in all caps, and so she's like, "I'm so excited you're here." And so,
Oh.
but she's mainly like a source of comfort. There was a school shooting in our area in September
Oh
and
God.
in our
I'm
school
sorry.
district. Yeah. And I could talk forever about that issue, but
Hmm.
so that day and that week, like kids were like crying into her fur. And those like, okay, I'm here for you. So
Yeah.
she's a
Well,
doll.
um, how does your work differ if you're working with older kids rather than the young ones? Can you still do some sort of play therapy with the older children, or is that like you eschew that for something else when they get older?
Yeah, I mean it obviously depends on the kids because there could be like a kid who's still a young 13-year-old or
Hmm.
an old 13-year-old. They're really different, you know.
Yeah.
And so I do have a lot of games. I have a lot of icebreaker games, but
Hmm.
something that is really important to me and that I talk about a lot on my like social media is that I am up with what the current trends are like in social media. I'm making a course that'll hopefully be ready this summer about how to help your kids navigate social media in this day and age.
Mm.
And so I know like what's going on with like music, what's going on as much as I can, right? With shows. And so we can have like conversations based on that and like,
Hmm.
you know, different games like based on that. Like if you were this character in Stranger Things, tell me how you would act. And so
Ah.
that kind of thing. Because I feel it's a soapbox issue for me as a clinician that if kids know that you care about their world, they're more likely to talk to you about the harder things. You know,
Hmm.
because like some of the things are arguably boring, right?
Hmm.
And so some of the video games, I know so much about Minecraft. I have a million Minecraft, like I have these magnetic blocks that are they're Minecraft themed, and
Yes.
so I'll have a kid like show me what your safe enclosure would be like if
Mm.
you could, and so then they like build the thing. So it
That's
looks a
really
little bit
cool.
different, but I try. I try every kid I see. I try to at least know something about one thing they're really into.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. What is your feeling about updating the parents on the progress or what's going on within the therapy session? Because I had a situation once, just as an example, where I was taking my daughter to therapy and I asked for an update because it had been like a bunch of weeks and I didn't know really anything that was going on. And this, I think my daughter was like 8 at the time or something. And she was like, I'm sorry, there's client privilege or whatever that thing is, like
Confidentiality.
confidentiality, and I can't really like say anything to you about it. And I was like, she's 8. Like, I can you just give me like
Yeah.
some kind? And she was like, if there's ever anything that comes up that's where she is talking about harming herself or someone else, then I would certainly tell you that. But other than that, we really hold that. And I was just like, I don't know. So that didn't work for me as a parent.
No.
What is your feeling on that?
Yeah. So like what I tell parents in the intake and then the kids in the first session is I'm like, unless you tell me you're gonna hurt yourself, someone else or someone's hurting you, it's confidential. I'm like, but your parents gonna want to know what's going on in here. So here's what you can trust. And I tell like both. I'm like, you can trust that I will never quote you, but your
Mm,
parent, has a right to know what's happening in here. So I will tell them either something I said, something we did, a strategy that we're going to try. But your direct words, unless it's in those categories, will never get back to them because you can just tell them that yourself. I'm like,
mhm.
but there are definitely things like in the gray area, but that's like keep everybody happy. Because I mean, I would think that that's weird to not know what's going on behind closed doors with an adult, and you're eight.
Yeah, I was just
Like that
yeah,
just
I didn't
that doesn't sit well. Yeah, and so if something is in like a gray area, like I consider like bullying, in some of that gray area. No, like say it's like, it's not gotten out of hand. It's a little annoying, but it's like concerning. And
mhm,
so if I find that there's something that I really shouldn't hold, I'll be like, okay, so here are your choices. We can bring mom in and we can talk together and I can lead the conversation about like some concerns I have about this person. Um,
mhm,
or I can call mom later, or I can trust that you will, and I will check in with mom in about 2 days. And
mhm,
so to see how that's it. And most of the time with those kind of things, they're like, I want you to lead the conversation. So then I'll bring
mhm.
mom in. And I really try a lot to normalize things. So I'm like, Mom, have you ever had a situation that you felt embarrassed when you were a kid to tell your parents? Usually they pick up where I'm going and they're like, yeah. And so it's important to build that bridge, but I don't think that
Mhm.
there are things that, I mean, that's not really great if I'm holding it and I'm like, well, that sucks. See you next Tuesday.
Right. Yeah.
I don't think that would be great.
Right. Yeah.
And I mean, a lot of times kids will tell me, say with bullying, we'll stick with bullying, that they don't want to tell mom
Mhm.
because mom will do something. Mom will call, mom will email. And they're like, that will make it worse. So I'll say,
Mhm.
like, what if we ask mom, like, like a couple of different options? And so I'll say, like, Mom, would you be willing to hold this for a week and see if things get better? And if things don't get better, then it's the green light to contact the teacher. And
Mhm.
so, like, usually they're willing to do that. But of course, the parent's
Mhm.
gonna want to do something.
Right.
And so, but that's usually what I find to be the barrier of why they don't want to tell mom.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. What about in the situation where the child may be suicidal or something that really, really intense like that? How do you handle something like that?
Yeah, I mean that's usually in the category of hurt themselves, and so like
Mhm.
that's when things shift.
Yeah.
The like the buzz line in the field, is like if they are in imminent danger.
Mhm.
But and then so you're like, do like the flipping point of if a kid gets hospitalized or not is if they
Mhm.
have a plan.
Uh-huh.
And so, but I mean, there's still things alarming, in my opinion, without having like an actual plan.
Mhm.
So, I mean, it really depends,
Mhm.
because, it's really important to keep that safe space. But I'll tell kids, like, no, I only want you to know. And I'll be like, if you're not alive, you don't have this safe place anymore. So,
Mhm. Mhm.
and there was a period in my life that I worked in community mental health along with private practice. It was not the wisest time in my life, but
Mm.
where it was in the adolescent intensive outpatient unit, and it was for 100% suicidal kids. And so
Mm.
I'm pretty like well versed in how to communicate. And
Mhm.
so I think a lot of it depends on the family dynamics. But if there's a kid that enters my office that I'm concerned about, they're not going to leave my office without the parent knowing.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Gotcha. Gotcha.
If I'm like I'm not gonna see you next Wednesday, like
Mhm.
if I'm gonna, like that's just not ethical. And
Right.
so sometimes it does look like disappointing the kid, but they know the limitations of confidentiality from the very beginning.
Right. Gotcha. Um, you mentioned a community center, a clinic situation. A lot of these children, I mean, I would say all of these children, they have Medicaid, right? So there's a barrier there in terms of like finding really good therapy sometimes. I'm assuming you're a private practice, right? So that wouldn't include like Medicaid or
No,
anything
I'm a
like that.
Medicaid provider.
You are a Medicaid provider, amazing,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
you're in
because
Colorado,
yeah,
correct?
one more time. Yes, in Colorado. Yes.
Okay.
Because of that, I feel like
Yeah,
there's inequity in healthcare.
yes, that's what I've really experienced. Both of my children have Medicaid, and it's really difficult to find great providers. If they're in a state, that's not Colorado and they can't get to someone like you, do you have any advice about how to select a therapist or what questions to ask? Or I guess even if they could afford, a private practice or whatever it is, what are some of your suggestions about like how to go about finding the right therapist for your child?
Yeah, it's really hard.
Mhm.
I would say, there's a certification that a lot of kid therapists have these days called synergetic play therapy, SPT. So on that website, there's like a list per state of like providers, but you don't necessarily know if they're Medicaid. Um, there's that. There's also Psychology Today, and
Mhm.
you can filter the search per like if they take Medicaid, if they specialize. But
Yes.
I will just say that it is really really tricky, because a
Mhm.
lot of good clinicians have waiting lists, and that there's not a lot of openings, and so
Yeah.
I would say to cling to someone that you trust and ask them who, you know,
Mhm.
because I mean, I have friends in other states that
Mhm.
could potentially be helpful, but yeah, like there's no easy way to say like it's really, really, really hard.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, it is. Um, I had a question about generational trauma. I think that a
Mm.
lot of these children have generational trauma. I think a lot of us in general have generational trauma. Can you talk a little bit about that, maybe for the listeners who aren't familiar with that term, what that is, and how you can work to heal that?
Yeah. No, in my book I touch on that a lot because I believe that if my so I'm an only child. My mom, like I said, died when I was 22. Um and I believe that had my mom had the right supports, had a good podcast she listened to, had a
Mhm.
book, the very trajectory of my life would have been different. Like everything, no. But you know, in the 80s and 90s, they didn't have the resources that we have now. My
Mhm.
mom died before texting. And so I think that when I make videos for social media, oftentimes I'm speaking to my mom out there. That I'm just like, if one person is like, hey, I'm gonna try this strategy different, or if I like, yeah, I'm actually gonna go to my own therapy. That's enough for me to make that time I made the video worth it. So I think it's the reality of knowing that we all have like broken stories because we're all humans. You know,
Mhm.
parents will say to me, I think I broke my kid. I'm like, first of all, your kid's not broken. Second of all, they're being raised by humans. So yeah, okay. And so I think that the more work that we do to heal our own wounds, realize our own attachment issues, our own limitations, our own trigger points, the better that the younger generation has that's around
Mhm.
us. So I think realizing that we all come into the story with
Mhm.
generational trauma because that's kind of the legacy. And so
Mhm.
in order to heal, to make it not so hard for them, I think it's imperative that we do our own work.
Absolutely. Yeah. Let's talk about your book. You mentioned it. Can you tell the listeners what it is and talk a little bit more about the book?
Yes, it's very pretty.
It
Um,
is. Those are your
it's,
colors.
those are my colors. Yeah.
Those are
And
your colors.
fun fact, it just got published in Korea, which is super random, but it is
Mhm.
yellow because apparently purple signifies death in Korea. Fun
Oh,
fact.
okay.
Yeah. All right.
For the listeners, people who are only listening,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
her book is called With Love from a Children's Therapist by
Yes.
Stacy Schaffer. Yeah.
Yes. So my book, I would say that it is part memoir from surviving a traumatic childhood and part clinical guidance that I've seen from sitting on the other side of the couch for 20 years. And I was on a podcast that she introduced my book as a guide to not emotionally damage the next generation. And I really liked that. And so it's combination of like nuggets of things over the years that I've picked up that might be helpful, and perhaps things that I needed to have a better journey in my childhood that younger Stacy
Hmm.
deserved but didn't get.
Mhm. Okay. Yeah. And where can people get that book?
So my book is on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. I did my own audiobook. I flew to Nashville. So if you like
Nice.
this voice, I'm recovering from laryngitis, so it doesn't sound like this, but it's on Audible and Spotify. And if you go to my website, which I'm sure will be in the show notes,
Mhm.
you can put in my email, your email address, and you'll get the first chapter of my book for free. And so
Mhm.
people can access it that way, but it's on all of the major platforms.
Oh, that's wonderful. And what is your website? Just in case people don't have access to the show notes.
Yeah. Oh, it's stacyschaffer.com. So it's
Okay.
Stacy with no E, Schaffer with the C and two F's, because there's a million ways to spell my name. And
Mhm.
so stacyschaffer.com.
Okay. And are you active on, I think you mentioned social media. What's your favorite
Yeah.
platform and where
Um,
can people
in,
find you there?
yeah, Instagram is Hope Restored. You can find me on
Okay.
Instagram.
Hope restored. Very, very good. What would you say, for people who are welcoming a new child into their home, can you think of any advice that you would give them? What would be the advice for how to approach this new relationship, outside of therapy, just for the people, in their own home? Can
Yeah.
you Yeah.
Yeah, so I do see a lot of adopted kids, and I think what personally what I think is important is to recognize, of course, that you want this child to have a safe place, realize they're in a safe space now, but it's also equally important to honor the grief of what has been,
Mhm.
because if they're in that situation, it's not for a great reason. And
Mhm.
so I think sometimes in lots of scenarios, not just adopted or foster kids, we want so bad to jump to the good stuff without honoring the story,
Mhm.
and I think that everybody just wants to be seen and heard. So there's a family that I see that's amazing and incredible, and I love this family. And the one time there was, like a part of the story that was really painful, and so
Mhm.
brought like mom in, to say, hey, like let's honor this part. And their mom's like, yes, but I think we as people don't like to deal with the hard and the scary and think that if we don't go there, it'll just stay away, and it doesn't.
Right. Yeah.
And so
Yes.
yeah, and so I think to be open to just the reality of, yes, they have all these great things in front of them and they have a great life now, but there's pain there, and so to be able to hold both, I think
Mhm.
is super healing. To be like, I am not going to feel like insecure about the fact that you're grieving, whatever story
Mhm.
you came from, also
Yeah.
knowing that like you're safe now.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think that there's also the thing of a lot of people needing to do visits, or I shouldn't say needing, getting to do visits with the birth family,
Yeah.
and, the emotional toll that that takes going back and forth for the child, for the whole, triangle, of course, but for the child especially. How can they handle that? Like, I have a lot of people that I know who have said, my child is great, they're fine. Then they go for their visit and everything kind of explodes. And then, by the time we have them back to, a baseline and things are good, then they go see them again and it goes and explodes again. How do you handle that?
Yeah, I think, excuse me,
Sure, no problem.
laryngitis is not great in my field, tell you that. Um, so, like, I'm thinking of a family that recently got a voicemail, and that from the biological parent, and that just like was was a tailspin. And
Mhm.
so I like the idea of creating like rhythms or routines like in response, because I think a lot of what happens is that trauma gets stored in the body,
Mhm.
and that we try too hard to like go to the logical like right away, like just
Mhm.
as a society. And so I like the idea of having some kind of ritual, whether it is like, depending on the age, like launching themselves into like a squishmallow pile, like
Mhm.
getting a plate from the thrift store, writing what they feel and smashing it outside, like
Mm.
something. I do that. I'm sure the custodians here love me, but I try to pick up all the pieces. But I do stuff like that a lot. With kids, like we go out to the dumpster and then I'll take a video of them for the parent, and it's slow mo. It's really satisfying. But I think that like once like some of that trauma like gets like out of the body, they're able to like think more clearly and have that conversation. But I think sometimes we again want to make it better, so that because we don't want the people that we love to be in pain. Of course we don't.
Yeah.
And so, but we try to go too fast there, when really some of that ick just like is just it's really primal.
Yes.
Like because like
Yes.
those birth wounds are so primal, that it's like
Yes.
there's no replacing, and no one's saying that I'm trying to replace it. Like, but I want to be like a support to you, but honor that like there's ick that's gonna be there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. I love the piece of advice to physicalize it, to do that. I remember once taking a course where they had us smash coconuts. Because
Ooh,
coconuts, like, yeah, you can like smash. I mean, it wouldn't be good for like a little kid because it's kind of hard to smash. But if
oh, fun
you
fact.
get like a whole coconut and you're either a preteen and above probably could do it, and you smash it, you go outside and you smash it, and it really is
Oh, I
satisfying because it
like
just like
that. Good.
smashes
I'm
up.
putting
Yeah.
that in my pocket. Ooh,
Yeah.
noted. Like
Yeah.
puts adds coconut to grocery list.
Yes. I think there's something to the somatic piece of it. And I know somatics is like such a buzzword now, but do you incorporate that in your work in other ways?
Yes, I well, so my safe place, my outlet is at
Mhm.
kickbox, and
Ooh,
so
nice.
it is like my very very happy place, and I try to go 4 times a week. Like I
Mm.
always tell kids, I was like, yeah, I like punch bags. Kids are like, you, I was like, I punch bags so I don't punch people, and I was like, because life is hard. And so
Yep.
I have to that thought, like I have a kid size punching bag. It's called a boa, a bag of air is the brand, and
Mm.
you can write on it. And so I have kids boxing gloves, and so we'll do a lot of stuff because like I know how cathartic it is for me, and I have pool noodles which make a really satisfying sound if you hit
Mhm.
against a wall or the punching bag. So I'll have them because it's like it's like markers that you can write on the bag with. It's supposed to come off. It doesn't really come off great, but they can write what they are mad or upset about,
Mm.
and then one of the strategies is called voicing the bag, and so then you're doing the voice of the thing they're mad at. I'm like, you call that a hit, like that kind of thing. And
Uh-huh.
so
Uh-huh.
like I have one kid that every time I see them, they're like, "Can we get the bag out?" Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
Oh, that's really cool. I love that. Great idea.
I love it so
Have
much. I
I
really like the coconuts. I'm like, my brain is like spinning with who I'm going to use that with next.
Yeah, yeah, and I suppose if you didn't wanna do coconuts, you could do, like it would be really messy, but, like, tomatoes or something would smash easier, but tomatoes would be gross, and it would just, like, get everywhere.
Mm.
But
I think I
anyway,
would,
yeah.
yeah, I think I want to do it first, the coconut, be like, to have that feeling. So be like, no, I know it feels really good.
Yeah, yeah, and it's because 'cause it's got some heft to it too, so when you throw it, it really is yeah, it's
Love
satisfying. Um, what have I missed? Have I missed anything special that, you would like to highlight or any kind of nuggets, that you like to talk about? If not, no worries, but I always like to ask people that
that.
just in case I'm missing something.
Well, when I right before we started recording, I was talking to my friend Tess, and she adopted Aspen, who is her cousin, but like from
Mhm.
when she was really young. And Aspen's now like 11,
Mhm.
and I think that I've learned from Tess just like how real it is, the gamut of emotions as a foster mom, like
Mhm.
adoptive mom.
Yes.
And so like, about like what that it's not all like sunshine and daisies like once they're adopted, and that there's
Right.
real feelings. And so I think I would want to encourage the parents to like get their own support, because the reality that like it's huge and amazing, and like what a gift. And also there's a flip side, that
Mhm.
there can be exhaustion and resentment, like all the things. And
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I would want to encourage, like, yes, of course you want your kid taken care of course you do, but it's also important to honor your own needs, which ultimately impacts the kid.
Absolutely. That's a beautiful piece of advice, and,
Mhm.
something that I really am trying every day to take better care of myself. I want to go back full circle to when we started and I introduced you, and your introduction included seeker of joy. And I am also a seeker of joy. And I think especially now in this day and age, we really need to seek out joy. So if you want to say a couple of words about that and how you do that, I would love to hear about that.
Yeah, I have friends with a boat, so in the summer we surf. So I
Mm-hmm.
really like to surf, like a kickbox. I always have in my schedule something to look forward to, and so
Mm-hmm.
I always like encourage my like teens, young adults, like to put something on their schedule that they're looking forward to. Going to shows.
Mm.
I try to like travel when I can. I was just in Colombia with a friend. Super
Mm-hmm.
random story about how we chose Colombia, but it was really important to me to unplug. Like kids are like, "What do you mean you're gone for a week?" And I'm like, "You need me to be gone for a week."
Mm-hmm.
And so I try to practice what I preach about self care because it's just not glamorous to be burnt out. And it's not a
Mm-hmm.
badge of honor, like they kind of told us in our 20s, like and
Yeah.
so like it's important to me that I'm taking care of this vessel so that I can support other people.
Mm-hmm. And what if the child says, I don't have anything to look forward to? Like, what if you say, oh, put something on your calendar to look forward to? And what if they're like, I don't have anything?
Yeah. Well, I also try to encourage like it not to have to be something big, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
to not like you don't have to travel to South America to have the thing like you're looking forward
Right.
to.
Yes.
Like it can be as simple as like I want you to go like watch your show and notice like how you feel in your body after you watch the show. I want you to make a plan with a friend. Like it doesn't have to
Mm-hmm.
be like huge, but
Right.
something that like is adding a little bit. Like I'm having dinner with a friend tonight. Super excited, really
Right.
excited about that food I'm going and my friend that I'm gonna see. And
Yeah.
so that there's recognition that it's not all hard. When it can
Yes.
feel like all good or all bad and then they
Mm-hmm.
swing. That like, yeah, I'm personally going through stuff. I'm really irritated about my voice and also super excited about tonight.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that is a capacity that we all need to learn to, we can increase, right? Is how to hold, multiple things at once, and,
Yes.
to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, and to just be able to say, yeah, like this stuff is really bad, but it's not all bad. I can take a walk outside, and that really shifts for me personally, man, I get outside for like 10 minutes and just walk around. Woo, I feel better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a chapter in my book called, they're all hashtags because the subtitle of my book is hashtag lessons I've learned along the way. But I have a chapter called hashtag and also. So like it is literally about that, about like honoring the two. Like this is true and this is also true. You know,
Mm-hmm.
like that,
Yes.
like, it can feel like the world is on fire. And also I'm seeing good things that people are doing in the world to fight back. There's both happening. And I think if I had learned that when I was younger, that it would have been really helpful to be like,
Yeah.
there's always the two that's happening,
Mm-hmm.
and it's to live in
Mm-hmm.
the in between that I think can help us stay afloat.
I love that. Stacy, it's so wonderful to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Her book, again, is With Love from a Children's Therapist, Stacy Schaffer, and everything will be in the show notes for you listeners. And thank you.
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm happy to have been here.